following story was shared by a former National Park ranger. He worked in one of the most remote areas of the Pacific Northwest, in the United States. Our national parks are symbols of beauty, but for those who live and work deep within them, they can become a silent green prison. This is a true account of what happens when you realize you aren't as alone as you think. This is not just a story about the woods, it's a story about the thin line between isolation and being hunted. I spent 3 years working as a seasonal ranger in a park that I won't name for legal reasons. Let's just say it's deep in the heart of Washington State. It's a place where the trees are so thick, they block out the sun even at noon, and the moss grows over everything, like a soft green shroud. My job was simple on paper: trail maintenance, monitoring wildlife, and basic forest management. But the reality was much more lonely. I lived in a small cabin about 5 miles away from the nearest paved road. My only neighbor was the wind, and my only company was the radio that rarely caught a clear signal. For the first 2 years, I loved it. I'm an introvert by nature, and the silence was a luxury. I spent my evenings reading by the fireplace, or watching the fog roll over the ridges. But in the summer of my 3rd year, the atmosphere began to shift. It wasn't something I could point to immediately. It was a feeling, a prickle on the back of my neck every time I turned my back to a window. It started with the smell. At first, I thought a pipe had leaked, or a rodent had died behind the drywall. It was a faint, sour odor, something metallic and organic at the same time. It reminded me of unwashed laundry mixed with old copper. I spent my entire weekend off scrubbing the floors, checking the crawl space, and even pouring bleach down the drains. But the smell didn't go away. In fact, it seemed to get stronger whenever the sun went down. It felt like the house itself was sweating out something rotten. Then came the small disappearances. I'm a man of habit. One Monday, I noticed a box of granola bars was missing. I assumed I had just forgotten I'd eaten them. But then, a week later, 2 cans of beef stew and a bag of dried fruit were gone. I began to doubt my own memory. Was the isolation finally getting to me? Was I sleepwalking and eating in the middle of the night? I even started leaving notes for myself, but the feeling of being gaslit by my own home wouldn't leave me. Everything felt off. Every shadow looked a bit too long. Every silence sounded a bit too loud. One rainy Tuesday, I came home from a long day of clearing fallen timber. I was exhausted, covered in mud and pine resin. As I stepped into the cabin when I felt a draft, I looked toward the hallway and saw the hatch to the attic was slightly askew, just a fraction of an inch. I stood there, frozen, with my hand still on the doorknob. I had never opened that attic, not once in 3 years. I told myself it was the pressure change from the storm outside. I pushed the hatch shut with a broom handle and tried to forget about it, but that night, the sounds began in earnest. It wasn't just the house settling. These were deliberate sounds. I was lying in bed when I heard it directly above me. Thud, a heavy muffled sound, like a weight being dropped onto the insulation. Then scrape, it sounded like someone was dragging a heavy bag across the rafters. I held my breath, my heart hammering so loudly in my ears. Creak on creak, creak, footsteps. Slow, methodical footsteps moving from the attic toward the kitchen. I lay there for hours, paralyzed, clutching my service pistol under my pillow. The next few days were a blur of paranoia. My toothbrush would be wet. When I hadn't used it, my Polaroid camera seemed to have been moved. The breaking point came on a Friday night. I walked into the hallway and looked up. The hatch was wide open, a dark, yawning square in the ceiling. And there, dangling from the edge, was a single dirty piece of string. Tied to the end was my spare key, the one I kept hidden outside. I grabbed my flashlight and climbed onto a chair. I shone the light into the darkness. The insulation had been flattened. Into a makeshift bed, there were piles of my clothes, arranged into a humanoid shape. And the photos, dozens of Polaroids, of me, eating, reading, sleeping, all taken from above. In the furthest corner, I saw a pair of eyes, dull, human, and wide with manic energy. I saw a hand, pale, thin, and covered in filth. Reach out, I didn't scream. I ran 5 miles in the pitch black to the main road. When the police returned, the cabin was empty. But on the kitchen table was one last Polaroid. It was a photo of me from only minutes before I had arrived home that night. On the back Written in charcoal were the words. I liked it better when you didn't look up. We were happy then, they never caught him. I moved to a high-rise in Seattle, as far away from the trees as possible, but sometimes, at 3 a.m., I hear a soft, rhythmic scratching from the ventilation duct above my bed, and I realize some shadows don't stay in the woods, they follow you home. Some people collect vintage vinyl records, others collect stamps. Me, I collect old cameras. There's something haunting about a lens that has seen decades of history that we'll never know. But a few months ago, I bought something from an estate sale in a small town. Something that made me regret my hobby entirely. The sale was for a house that had been locked up for nearly 20 years. The family wanted everything gone. Among the piles of dust-covered furniture, I found an old heavy-duty 90s camcorder. It was a Panasonic, the kind that used those small VHS-C tapes. It felt unnaturally heavy, as if it were holding on to something more than just electronics. The woman selling it looked at me with a strange expression, not of greed, but of relief. When I offered her $20 for it, when I got home to my apartment, I spent hours cleaning the casing. I had to order a specific battery and a power adapter online. During that week, the camera sat on my nightstand. I know it sounds crazy, but I felt like the lens was watching me while I slept. Every time I'd wake up in the middle of the night, the glass of the lens would catch the moonlight, looking like a cold, unblinking eye. Finally, the charger arrived. I plugged it in, and the machine hummed to life. The mechanical whirring was loud in my quiet room. I pressed the eject button, and out popped a single tape. It had no label, no date, just a piece of scratched plastic. I pushed the tape back in and connected the camera to my TV. The screen flickered with static, that classic black and white snow. Then, an image began to form. The first few minutes were normal, boring even. It showed a family birthday party from 1994. A little girl blowing out candles, people laughing. But then, the video cut abruptly to black. The static returned for nearly 10 minutes. I was about to turn it off, but then, the image came back. The quality was different. It was much clearer, as if it had been recorded on a much better lens. And it wasn't from 1994. The camera was moving through a hallway that looked very familiar, too familiar. The person holding the camera was breathing heavily. A wet, raspy sound that made the hair on my arm stand up. They panned the camera left, passing a mirror. The person holding the camera was wearing a heavy dark raincoat, and their face was completely obscured by a medical mask. My heart stopped when I saw the painting on the wall in the video. It was a print of the starry night, with a small tear in the bottom corner. I looked up at my own wall. I have that exact same print with the exact same tear. This wasn't a recording from 20 years ago. This was recorded in my apartment. I sat there, frozen on my couch, the remote trembling in my hand. In the video, the hooded figure continued to walk through my living room. They stopped at my bookshelf. They reached out a gloved hand and touched my books, lingering on my favorite novels. The timestamp at the bottom of the screen read, last night, 3:14 a.m. I didn't want to keep watching, but I couldn't move. It was like a train wreck in slow motion. The figure in the video turned toward the bedroom door. My bedroom door. The camera shakes slightly as they step over the threshold. The room is dark, lit only by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. The camera pans to the bed. There I was. I saw myself, fast asleep, completely unaware that a stranger was standing 3 feet away. With a camera, the person recorded me for what felt like hours. They zoomed in on my face. I watched myself breathe. I watched myself stir in my sleep. The raspy breathing of the cameraman got louder, more excited. Then, the figure did something that made me want to scream. They reached out their free hand, and they began to stroke my hair. In the video, I saw my own head move slightly under the pressure of their fingers, but I never woke up. I had slept right through it. Suddenly, the figure in the video stopped. They looked toward the nightstand. They panned the camera down to show the very same camcorder I was now using to watch this tape. In the video, the person carefully placed the camera back on the nightstand, right where I found it this morning. But wait, If they put the camera back on the nightstand, then how is the video still recording? I realized, with a jolt of pure horror, that there were two cameras. The video on the TV suddenly shifted. It wasn't the camcorder anymore. It was a different angle. High up, from the corner of my ceiling, the figure in the raincoat looked directly into the hidden camera lens and waved, slowly, methodically. I jumped up and looked at the corner of my ceiling. Small. Black. A pinhole lens was staring back at me. I felt like the walls were closing in. I grabbed my phone to call the police, but before I could dial, the TV screen changed one last time. The video wasn't a recording anymore. The play icon disappeared, replaced by a red, live icon. The screen showed me, standing in my living room. Looking at the TV, I saw the back of my own head on the screen, and behind me, in the reflection of the TV, I saw the closet door slowly begin to creak open. I didn't look back. I threw the remote at the TV and bolted out the front door. I didn't stop running until I reached a gas station 3 blocks away. The police arrived 10 minutes later. They searched the apartment top to bottom. The closet was empty. The raincoat was gone. The second camera door was gone. But when they checked the old camcorder, the tape was missing. The only thing left was a small, handwritten note tucked into the battery compartment. It said, "Thanks for the upgrade. See you tonight." I never went back to that apartment. I live in a motel now, paying in cash, changing locations every week. I don't own a TV. I don't own a phone with a camera. But every time I see a piece of glass or a dark window, I can't help but wonder, is there a lens somewhere, hidden in the shadows, still recording me? They call it the uncanny valley. It's that skin-crawling feeling you get when you look at something that looks almost human, but not quite. A mannequin, a wax figure, or a robot. But what do you do when that feeling comes from your own wife? My name is Mark, and I've been married to Sarah for 7 years. I know her better than I know myself. I know the way she takes her coffee, black, with exactly half a teaspoon of sugar. I know the way she laughs, a little too loud, with a snort at the end. Or at least, I thought I did. It started 3 days ago, after she came back from a late-night jog in the woods. She came through the door breathing hard. She didn't say hello. She just walked straight to the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and drank tap water for nearly 2 minutes straight. When she finally turned around, her face was empty. No smile, no "I'm back," just a blank, porcelain stare. "Are you okay, honey?" I asked. She looked at me, and there was a delay, maybe just a second, but it felt like a computer processing a command. "I am great, Mark," she said. Her voice was her voice, but the rhythm was wrong. It was too melodic, like she was reciting a poem she had just memorized. That night, she didn't move. She just lay there, eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling in the pitch black. Every time I'd drift off, I'd wake up to the sound of her practicing. I heard her whispering in the dark. She was repeating my name, over and over. "Mark, Mark, Mark." Each time, she changed the pitch, higher, lower, more affectionate, more angry. It sounded like a bird, learning to mimic a human phrase. On the second day, the glitches got worse. I watched her from the doorway of the kitchen. She held a knife by the blade, not the handle, and she was rhythmically tapping it against a piece of bread. She wasn't cutting it. She was just mimicking the motion of someone who didn't understand the purpose of a knife. When I cleared my throat, she snapped her head toward me. And I do mean snapped. Her neck moved faster than a human should. "Hungry?" she asked. I looked at the bread. It was covered in her own blood. She was gripping the blade so hard, she didn't seem to notice. She didn't feel the pain. "Sarah, your hand! You're bleeding!" I yelled. She looked down at the red liquid staining the counter. She tilted her head, confused. "Oh," she said. Then she smiled. It was the widest smile I have ever seen. It showed too many teeth. Red is a healthy color, right? I spent the rest of that day in my office with the door locked. I searched for creatures that live in the wilderness. Mimics, creatures that steal a person's shape, but struggle with the human details. But then, I heard it. From the other side of my office door, The sound of Sarah scratching at the wood, slowly rhythmic 1, 2, 3, and then she spoke, but she used my voice. "Mark, are you in there?" "I'm scared." It was my own voice, perfectly replicated, coming from her throat. I sat on the floor of my office, my back against the door, feeling the vibrations of her scratching. My own voice was pleading with me from the hallway. It was the most disturbing thing I've ever experienced. "Mark, please open the door." "It's cold out here." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was tight, with a primal terror. Eventually, the scratching stopped. The footsteps retreated. I knew I had to leave, but I couldn't just leave Sarah. The real Sarah, if she was still out there. I waited until I heard the back door open and close. I looked out the window. I saw her walking into the woods, but she wasn't walking like a person. Her knees were bending slightly outward, and her arms were swinging in a way that defied physics. She was heading back to where she had gone jogging 3 days ago. I grabbed a heavy flashlight and my hunting knife. I followed her, staying far enough back to stay hidden. The woods felt different that night. The owls were silent. Even the crickets had stopped their chirping. The forest was holding its breath. She led me deep into a ravine I had never explored. In the center of a small clearing, there was a jagged opening in the ground, a cave entrance, hidden by thick briars. The thing that looked like my wife crawled into that hole on all fours, its spine twisting in a sickening way. I waited 5 minutes, my heart pounding in my teeth. I had to know. I crept to the edge of the hole and shone my light down. The cave wasn't deep, but it was filled with things. I saw piles of clothes, hikers' backpacks, shoes, and then, in the far corner, I saw a movement. "Sarah?" I whispered, my voice trembling. A figure huddled in the corner turned around. It was Sarah. She was pale, shivering, and her eyes were puffy from crying. "Mark," she sobbed. "Is that you?" "Please, don't let it see you." I felt a wave of relief so strong I almost collapsed. She was alive. She was right there. I started to climb down into the hole to help her. But then, I stopped. Something was wrong. I looked at her hands. She was wearing her wedding ring. But I remembered. Sarah had lost her wedding ring in the garden 2 months ago. We never found it. I panned my flashlight to the other side of the cave. There was another Sarah, and another. There were 4 of them, all huddled in the shadows. All of them looked at me. All of them started crying at the same time. "Mark, help me! I'm the real one," they all said in unison. It was a chorus of my wife's voice, perfectly synchronized, echoing off the damp cave walls. Then, the thing that had followed me from the house crawled back into the clearing behind me. I spun around. It was standing upright now, but it was changing. Its skin was bubbling, shifting like hot wax. It was trying to match the exact shade of my jacket. It didn't have a face anymore, just a smooth surface of flesh. That was beginning to grow eyes. I didn't try to save any of them. I know that sounds cowardly, but when you see 5 versions of the woman you love, all begging for your life, you realize they are all lures. The real Sarah was gone, the moment she went for that jog. I ran, I didn't look back. I got in my car, drove to the next state, and I haven't stopped moving since. I sold the house through an agent. I told them to never call me. I live in a desert now, somewhere with no trees, no caves, no places to hide. But yesterday, I was at a grocery store. I heard a snort, a very specific snort at the end of a laugh. I turned around and saw a woman. She didn't look like Sarah. She was older, with blonde hair and glasses. But as she walked past me, she leaned in and whispered in my wife's voice, "You forgot your coffee. Mark, half a teaspoon of sugar. Remember? I don't look at people in the eyes anymore, because once you know they are out there, you start to see the glitches everywhere. The man at the bank who doesn't blink. The neighbor who waves with too many fingers. They are learning. They are practicing. And soon, there won't be any of us left to tell the difference."